The air in the executive boardroom smelled of dry erase markers, stale espresso, and the sharp, invisible scent of corporate panic. It was 9 o'clock on a cold Tuesday morning in Chicago. I sat near the back corner of the room, away from the floor-to-ceiling windows. I am Julian Grant. I am 48 years old, and my face is the kind of quiet, unremarkable canvas that people look past in hallways. For the last 8 months, my official title had been Senior Security Architecture Consultant at Atlas Systems. It is a long name for a job that boiled down to keeping a $750 million digital fortress from crumbling under constant cyber threats. At the head of the table stood Clarence Montgomery, the Vice President of Operations. Clarence wore his authority like a cheap cologne, loud and uninvited. He had been with the company for less than a year, but possessed the confidence of someone who had never faced the consequences of his bad decisions. He stood with his arms crossed, looking down the long table with a smug grin. "Your consulting contract is canceled, effective immediately," Clarence said. His voice cut through the soft hum of the air conditioning like a dull blade. I looked up from my laptop. On my screens, green lines of code scrolled across 3 terminal windows. The security grid I spent 8 months building was running flawlessly. Every defensive perimeter was green, protecting 12 of the largest Fortune 500 corporations in the country, including critical defense contractors. "Excuse me?" I said, keeping my voice flat and even. "You heard me, Mr. Grant," Clarence said, leaning forward and placing his palms flat on the wood. "We are terminating your consulting services. We have decided that your high fees are no longer justified. You have exactly 20 minutes to pack your belongings, hand over your credentials, and exit the building." I looked around the table. The other executives in the room suddenly found their folders and coffee cups extremely interesting. George Finch, the finance director, studied a spreadsheet on his tablet. Beatrice Thorne, the chief legal counsel, stared at her notepad, her pen hovering over a blank page. Only Diana Vance, the chief technology officer who had hired me 8 months ago, looked up. She shifted in her chair, her jaw tight, but she remained silent. Clarence had spent the last month building a political wall around himself, and she knew she did not have the votes to stop him. I did not argue. I did not raise my voice. I simply stared at Clarence for 3 long seconds. I saw the expectation of drama in his eyes. He wanted me to plead, to explain why the company needed me, to beg for a grace period. Instead, I quietly closed my active terminal windows. I began disconnecting the cables from my laptop, wrapping them in neat, precise loops. "That is it?" Clarence demanded, his smugness faltering for a split second. "No protests? No professional excuses?" I stood up, slinging my leather messenger bag over my shoulder. "What would be the point, Clarence? You have made your decision. You have run the numbers, and you believe you are making the correct move." "Damn and right I am," Clarence sneered, regaining his footing. "We do not need overpriced external contractors who think they are irreplaceable. I have a full internal information technology team under Oliver Drake. They can maintain what you built without charging us a fortune." I smiled. It was a very small, quiet movement of my lips, but it made Clarence blink. "I am sure they can," I said softly. His confidence wavered. He opened his mouth to say something, but his pride blocked the warning sign. "Security will escort you to your desk and then out of the building," he announced. "That will not be necessary," I said, picking up my briefcase. "But before I walk out of this door, I have one question for you, Clarence. Who is going to explain to the chairman why the entire $750 million security grid is going to disappear in less than 5 minutes?" The color drained from Clarence's face so fast it looked like a magic trick. "What did you just say?" I checked my watch. 4 minutes and 30 seconds now, to be exact. "You see, the security architecture I built for Atlas Systems has a very specific safety protocol. A dead man's switch, if you want to use the common term. It requires my personal primary architect credentials to authenticate every 48 hours. If the system does not receive that authentication, it assumes the primary administrator has been compromised, or that the network is undergoing a hostile takeover. It immediately initiates a complete and total lockdown. It cuts off all external connections, isolates the internal servers, and encrypts the communication channels to prevent data theft." Clarence stared at me, his mouth open. "You are lying. This is extortion. It is not extortion, I replied calmly. It is a standard protection feature. It is fully documented in the technical specifications. Section 62, subsection F, Appendix 18. I explicitly detailed the fail-safe protocols. If the primary architect does not authenticate, the fortress locks its gates. And right now the clock is ticking. Log in and authenticate then. Beatrice Thorne, the legal counsel, suddenly blurted out, her voice rising in pitch. I held up my hands, showing my disconnected laptop. With what authorization, Beatrice? Clarence just terminated my contract, effective immediately. My active status has been revoked. Under the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, 18 U.S.C. Section 1030, accessing a protected computer system without authorization or exceeding authorized access is a federal felony. Since I am no longer an authorized contractor, if I log into your servers right now to bypass a security protocol, I would be committing a federal crime. I am a compliance specialist, Beatrice. I do not break federal law, and I certainly will not face 5 years in a federal penitentiary just to clean up Clarence's mistake. 3 minutes, I added, looking at my watch again. I suggest you call Oliver Drake, but as I said, without the root credentials, his team cannot stop the lock sequence. Have a nice day, everyone. I turned and walked out of the boardroom, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind me. I walked down the long carpeted hallway toward my desk, my movements slow and deliberate. Behind me I could hear the muffled sound of raised voices from the boardroom, the sudden scrape of chairs against the floor, and the frantic click of heels. I did not look back. I went straight to my cubicle in the compliance annex. It was a quiet space tucked away near the primary server room, smelling of cool dust and ozone. I sat down in my chair and placed my bag on the desk. My chest was tight, my heart beating with the slow, steady rhythm of a man who had just stepped off a cliff and realized he could fly. I looked at the framed photograph on my desk. It was a picture of my parents, Harvey and Martha Grant, standing in front of the small auto repair shop my father had run for 40 years in Detroit. My father was a mechanic who could listen to the hum of an engine and tell you exactly which valve was sticking. My mother managed a small diner on the same street, keeping the books with a pencil and a yellow legal pad. They never made much money, but they taught me 2 lessons that defined my entire career. First, you respect the person who cleans the floors just as much as the person who signs the checks. Second, you never build a machine unless you know exactly how to turn it off when it goes wild. I had carried those principles through my education at Michigan State, my master's degree at Carnegie Mellon, and the 20 years of cybersecurity work that followed. I was not a visionary who painted broad strokes on whiteboards. I was the technician who built the engines. 8 months ago, Atlas Systems was in crisis. Their security infrastructure was leaking data, and their 3 largest clients were threatening to sue. Diana Vance, the chief technology officer, had called me at midnight, begging for help. I came in as an independent consultant. I designed a custom security grid from the ground up, a $750 million shield that protected 12 major clients and their sensitive data. It was beautiful, complex, and entirely tailored to the company's specific needs. But Clarence Montgomery had hated me from the day I arrived. Clarence did not care about security. He cared about control. He had wanted to hire a firm owned by his brother-in-law, a second-rate outfit that had logo designs but no technical depth. When Diana and the board overruled him and hired me, Clarence took it as a personal insult. For 8 months, he had been looking for a way to push me out. He finally found his opportunity by attacking my consulting fees during a budget review. He convinced the executive committee that my work was done, that the system was complete, and that his internal team could handle the routine maintenance. He had presented it as a massive cost-saving measure that would look wonderful on his annual report. But Clarence had made one fatal error. He was so eager to save money that he had refused to pay the $25,000 fee for the complete technical documentation package. That package contained the operational manual, the override protocols, and the custom encryption keys. It was a 300-page guide that detailed how the system worked under pressure. Clarence had called it a useless PDF and deleted the invoice, believing his IT team could figure it out on their own. Now, they were about to find out how wrong he was. I packed my favorite pen, my physical notebooks, and my coffee mug into a small cardboard box. The office around me was quiet, but I could feel the tension rising. Through the glass partition, I saw Oliver Drake, the IT director, rushing toward the server room with two technicians. Their faces were flushed, their eyes wide with panic. "Hey, Julian," Oliver panted, stopping outside my cubicle. "What is going on?" The monitoring dashboard just turned red. "All external ports are shutting down." I smiled, picking up my box. "Clarence terminated my contract, Oliver. Effective immediately. I am no longer authorized to access the system." "But the override sequence," Oliver said, his voice cracking. "We need the primary key. The system is rejecting our admin logins. The key is in the complete documentation package, Oliver. The one Clarence refused to purchase. Section 62, subsection F, Appendix 18. Do you know it?" Oliver pleaded. "Just tell us the alphanumeric string. We can type it in manually." I looked at him with genuine sympathy. Oliver was a decent manager, but he was out of his depth. "Even if I told you the 32-character string, Oliver, you cannot enter it without the specific alt code formatting for the Greek characters. If you make a single error, the system will interpret it as a brute force attack and accelerate the lockdown from 5 minutes to 30 seconds. And more importantly, as I told legal, giving you that key while my contract is terminated is a violation of federal computer access laws. I cannot help you." "But the clients," Oliver whispered. "You should talk to Clarence," I said. "He assured the board that your team had everything under control." I walked past him, my cardboard box under my arm. As I stepped into the elevator, I looked back at the floor. The lights on the IT department's ceiling were flashing. The alarms were silent, but the digital panic was deafening. The doors closed and I descended into the quiet morning. I spent the rest of my Tuesday at a quiet local diner on the north side, eating a warm slice of apple pie and drinking black coffee. I did not check my phone. I had switched it to silent, allowing my mind to settle after months of intense work. I went home, read a book, and slept for 9 hours. It was the first time in months that I did not feel the pressure of the security grid on my shoulders. The next morning, I woke up naturally at 7 o'clock. The morning sun was filtering through my blinds, painting gold stripes across my living room wall. I made a fresh pot of coffee, utilizing a French press my parents had given me when I started my consulting firm. I sat on my small balcony, listening to the distant hum of city traffic, enjoying the quiet moment. At 8 o'clock, I walked back inside and looked at my phone. It lay on the kitchen counter, face down. It was vibrating, not with a constant ring, but with the frantic, stuttering rhythm of a device receiving a barrage of text messages and missed calls. I flipped it over. There were 5 missed calls from George Finch, the finance director. There were 7 missed calls from Beatrice Thorne in legal, and 3 from Diana Vance, the chief technology officer. There were 12 emails marked high priority, their subject lines screaming in capital letters. I also had a text from Oliver Drake, sent at 8:15. "Julian, please call me. The system has initiated the lock sequence. All client connections are dropping. We cannot bypass it." I put the phone down and took a sip of my coffee. Back at the Atlas Systems office, the situation was descending into complete chaos. I could picture the scene clearly. In the open office, the monitoring screens would be flashing red. The technical support desk would be overwhelmed by calls. The first client connection to drop was Vanguard Defense. As a major defense contractor, their security protocols were incredibly strict. When their connection to the Atlas Systems security grid went dark, their internal alarms triggered. Within 10 minutes, their security team was on the phone, demanding answers. They were followed closely by Apex Capital, who reported that their financial transactional monitors were offline. By 9 o'clock, all 12 of the Fortune 500 clients were disconnected. In the executive conference room, Clarence Montgomery was pacing, his face red and slick with sweat. "How is this possible?" Clarence screamed at Oliver Drake. "You told me your team could handle this. You told me he was just an overpriced consultant." "We do not have the root keys," Oliver explained, holding up a diagnostic report. "The system has encrypted the communication channels. It is not responding to our admin commands. We need the override sequence." "Well, bypass it," Clarence ordered. "Hack into the system. You are the head of information technology, for heaven's sake. We cannot hack it, Clarence, Oliver said, his voice trembling with frustration. Julian built this system to resist state-sponsored cyber attacks. It uses quantum-resistant encryption. If we try to force our way in, the system will interpret it as a hostile intrusion and permanently delete the decryption keys. We would have to rebuild the entire $750 million infrastructure from scratch. Beatrice Thorne, the chief legal counsel, walked into the room, her face pale. I just got off the phone with the general counsel of Vanguard Defense, she said, her voice shaking. They are issuing a formal notice of breach. Under our service-level agreement, we are liable for $10 million in immediate penalties if the security grid is offline for more than 1 hour, and Apex Capital is preparing a similar notice. If all 12 clients issue notices, our direct liability will exceed $55 million by noon. Clarence fell back into his chair, his eyes wide. 55 million? That is impossible. It is very possible, Beatrice said, glaring at him. And there is more. I reviewed the contract Julian mentioned. He is correct. Because we terminated his contract effective immediately, his legal authorization was revoked. If we force him or ask him to log in without a signed contract, we are asking him to violate 18 U.S.C. Section 1030 of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. The company would be legally liable for inducing a federal crime. This is sabotage. Clarence yelled, slamming his hand on the table. He did this on purpose. He built a security system that does exactly what we paid him to do, Diana Vance said, walking into the room. He built a system that protects our clients from unauthorized access, including internal threats. The only reason we are in this position is because you refused to pay the $25,000 fee for the documentation package that contained the override codes. You tried to cut corners to make yourself look good, Clarence, and now you have cost us $55 million. The conference room door opened and the secretary stood there, looking terrified. Mr. Harrington is on the line, she whispered. He wants to speak to the executive committee. Lawrence Harrington, the chairman of Atlas Systems, was not a man who tolerated excuses. He was a self-made billionaire who had built the company from a small startup into a global leader. When he spoke, everyone listened. Clarence swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Put him through," he whispered. The conference room was completely silent, except for the quiet hum of the speakerphone. George Finch shifted nervously in his chair, adjusting his glasses. Beatrice Thorne stared at the black device in the center of the table as if it were a live grenade. Clarence Montgomery stood frozen, his eyes wide, sweat dripping down his cheek. Lawrence Harrington's voice did not rise above a conversational tone, which made it far more terrifying than a shout. "I want a clear, concise explanation of why my personal home network is locked down, and why the chief executive officers of 3 defense contractors have called my personal line this morning," Harrington said. Clarence Montgomery cleared his throat, his hands shaking. "Sir, we experienced a minor technical issue with our security grid during a routine transition of personnel. Our internal team is working to resolve it." "A minor technical issue?" Harrington repeated. "The word minor does not align with a $55 million liability notice from our legal department. I built this company over 30 years, Clarence. I will not watch you burn it down in 30 minutes to satisfy your ego." "Diana, explain the situation," Diana Vance stepped forward. "Mr. Harrington, yesterday morning Clarence terminated Julian Grant's consulting contract, effective immediately. Julian is the primary architect of the security grid. Because his contract was terminated, the system's automated safety protocol triggered a lockdown, recognizing the lack of authentication as a security breach. Our internal team cannot bypass the lockdown because we do not have the complete technical documentation or the root credentials." "And why do we not have the documentation?" Harrington asked. "Clarence chose to remove the documentation package from the contract to reduce consulting costs," Diana said simply. There was a long silence on the line. The silence lasted for seconds, but to the people in the room, it felt like an eternity. "Beatrice," Harrington said, "what is our legal position?" "Julian Grant is legally correct," Beatrice admitted. "Since his contract was terminated, he has no legal authorization to access the system. Under the Federal Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, if he logs in, he is committing a felony. He has refused to do so without a signed contract. If we attempt to access the system without the proper keys, we risk permanent data loss and contract termination with all 12 clients. Where is Mr. Grant now? Harrington asked. He is at home, sir, Diana said. He took a scheduled personal day. Get him on the line, Harrington ordered. 2 minutes later, my phone rang. I saw the office number and answered, Julian Grant speaking. Julian, this is Lawrence Harrington. Good morning. Mr. Harrington, I said, leaning back in my chair. I will not waste your time with pleasantries, Julian, Harrington said. I want this system online. What are your terms? I appreciated his directness. Lawrence Harrington, 68 years old, was a legend in the technology sector. He was a self-made man who had spent 3 decades building Atlas systems from a tiny 3-person office into a global giant. He understood that technical expertise was not something you could buy off the shelf or replace with buzzwords. Mr. Harrington, my terms are very simple, I said. First, I require a new contract. Not as an external consultant, but as the Chief Security Officer of Atlas Systems, with a permanent seat on the executive board. Clarence Montgomery gasped in the background, but Harrington ignored him. This seat will allow me to veto any technical decisions that compromise our security postures in the future. Go on, Harrington said. I want to hear the rest of your proposal. Second, I require full authority over all security operations, infrastructure, and personnel. The information technology team will report directly to me on all security matters. Third, I require a dedicated annual budget of $30 million for security maintenance, staff hiring, and infrastructure upgrades. That is exactly 4% of the $750 million security grid value. It is the minimum required to keep the system safe and avoid single points of failure. The current internal team is competent but severely understaffed and lacks the specialized training required for quantum-resistant networks. Security is not a product you buy and forget. It is a continuous process that requires constant vigilance, expert personnel, and resources. And the fourth term? Harrington asked. A protective termination clause, I said. I can only be terminated for cause by a unanimous vote of the full board of directors, with a mandatory 90-day notice period and a structured knowledge transfer protocol. This ensures that no individual executive can make a reckless personnel decision that threatens our national security contracts again. Under Delaware corporate law, we have a duty of care, and firing the primary security architect without a transition plan is a clear breach of that duty. That is outrageous, Clarence yelled in the background. He is holding us hostage. Clarence, be quiet, Harrington snapped. You have already cost this company $55 million this morning. Your opinion has no value here. Julian, if I agree to these terms, how long will it take to restore the security grid? 120 minutes from the moment I log in, I said. I will need my credentials restored immediately, and a signed copy of the contract sent to my email. Beatrice, draft the contract, Harrington ordered. Make sure the terms are exactly as Julian described, with no exceptions. If I find any discrepancy, you will answer to me directly. Diana, restore Julian's credentials. Julian, the contract will be in your inbox in 15 minutes. I expect to see you at the office in 30 minutes. I will be there, Mr. Harrington, I said. I hung up the phone, took a final sip of my coffee, and stood up to get dressed. The tide had turned. In my kitchen, I looked at the photograph of my father's garage in Detroit. My father, Harvey, had always told me that the most important tool is a clear agreement. He used to say that clear agreements prevent bad relationships. I was ready. When I arrived at the Atlas Systems building 30 minutes later, the atmosphere was completely different. The security guards at the front desk did not ask for my ID. They simply opened the gates and stood at attention. I took the elevator down to the basement server room. Oliver Drake and Clara Brooks were waiting for me, outside the heavy steel door. They looked exhausted, their shirts wrinkled and their eyes bloodshot. We got the contract, Julian, Oliver said, holding up his tablet. Beatrice signed it 10 minutes ago. Your credentials are fully restored. Thank you, Oliver, I said. Let us get to work. We walked into the server room, the cool air blowing over us. I sat down at the primary administrator terminal and opened my laptop. I connected the console cables and logged in. Nahat Neshung, verified the computer screen chimed. Grant, Julian, Chief Security Officer. The first step was to address the system lockdown. I navigated to the security protocol interface and entered the manual override sequence. I typed the 32-character alphanumeric key, carefully entering the Unicode alt codes for the Greek characters. Z4% sigma 88H star sign phi. The red lights on the screens stopped flashing, shifting to a steady yellow. System override accepted, the screen displayed. Initiating threat assessment scan. This scan will take 50 minutes, I told Oliver and Clara, who were watching over my shoulder. The system has to scan every internal database and client connection to ensure no one tried to exploit the lockdown while the gates were closed. While the diagnostics ran, I pulled up a schematic of the security grid on the main wall monitor. I decided to use the time to teach them how the system actually worked. I want you to understand the architecture, I said. I do not want this company to depend on one person. Security is a shared responsibility. The grid uses a 3-layer defense model. What is the first layer? Clara asked. The first layer is the moat, I explained. It monitors all incoming network traffic. It uses machine learning algorithms to study behavioral patterns. It can identify and filter out standard cyber attacks before they ever reach our internal servers. It learns what normal traffic looks like for Vanguard Defense, Apex Capital, and the other 10 clients. And the second layer? Oliver asked. The second layer is the wall, I said. If a threat passes the moat, the wall identifies it in real time. It does not just block the attack. It isolates the malicious code in a virtual container, traces the source back to the attacker, and deploys honeypots. These are fake databases that look real to the hacker. They waste the attacker's time and resources while we collect their digital signatures. That is brilliant, Clara said, writing notes on her pad. The final layer is the keep, I said. It protects our most sensitive client data. Even if a hacker breaches the moat and the wall, the keep uses quantum-resistant encryption. With current Earth technology, it would require more computing power than exists on the planet, and more time than the universe has existed to break that encryption by brute force. The terminal chimed, interrupting my explanation. Threat assessment complete. The screen displayed, 0 anomalies detected. System integrity at 100%. Awaiting restoration. Excellent, I said. Now we restore the client connections. We do it one at a time, starting with Vanguard Defense, then Apex Capital, then Summit Logistics. We must monitor each connection to prevent a cascading error. One by one, the red indicators on the world map turned green. After 78 minutes, the final client connection was restored. System fully operational. The terminal reported. All clients online. A collective sigh of relief filled the server room. Oliver leaned against the wall, laughing quietly. We did it, he said the next morning. I attended my first executive board meeting as Chief Security Officer. Lawrence Harrington sat at the head of the table. Clarence Montgomery sat at the far end, looking broken and small. Mr. Harrington looked at the board members. We experienced a crisis yesterday, Harrington said. A crisis that was entirely preventable. Clarence Montgomery made a personnel decision that violated the company's fiduciary duty of care under Delaware corporate law. He fired our lead security architect without a backup plan, exposing us to $55 million in immediate liabilities. That is a breach of fiduciary duty. Sir, I was trying to save budget, Clarence whispered. Your ignorance of our systems is not an excuse for exposing us to ruin, Harrington said coldly. You are being reassigned to a special projects role in business development, reporting directly to me. You will no longer have direct reports, budget authority, or executive decision-making power. Your salary will be reduced by 40%. Clarence nodded quietly, accepting his fate. Harrington turned to me. Julian, welcome to the board. I have approved your budget of $30 million. You have full authority to restructure the department. Thank you, Mr. Harrington, I said. My first act will be to hire 3 new analysts to support Oliver and Clara. Over the next few weeks, I worked to build a culture of security at Atlas Systems. I held training sessions every Friday, helping employees from all departments understand how to protect our systems. 3 months later, Lawrence Harrington called me into his office. Julian, I am expanding your role, he said, sliding a folder across his desk. I want you to take on the role of Chief Technology Officer in addition to your current position. Diana Vance has agreed to partner with you as our Senior Strategic Director. I smiled. I accept, Mr. Harrington, on one condition. We continue to prioritize our people over corporate buzzwords. Harrington smiled. That is why I hired you. Julian, that night I called my parents in Detroit, Chief Technology Officer. My father, Harvey Grant, laughed. That is a long way from the garage, son. It is, Dad, I said. But I still remember how to listen to the engine. I am proud of you. Julian, my mother Martha said. I hung up the phone, looking out at the city skyline. I had won the corporate chess game not by being ruthless, but by being prepared, competent, and true to the values my parents had taught me. Arrogance had met reality, and compliance had won the day.